In this quick take episode of the Real Estate Law Podcast, we're talking about W-2 jobs, the value of a W-2 job, and then the transition that you're going to make both mindset-wise and lifestyle-wise when you enter entrepreneurship. Hopefully there's going to be some overlap between those two things. We're speaking with Gianna Rahmani. She goes by G. She's an investor down in Florida. And we love this conversation because she had such a great approach to having that W-2 9 to 5 type job and why it's important to build up some necessary skills while you're in that job, but not to be tied to that for the rest of your life, especially if you have aspirations to have multiple revenue streams, multiple ways to make money, and a backup plan in case your employer ever decides that your position is no longer. That's happened to a lot of people over the years. It's happened to me before a couple times, and we always have a backup plan. So, what I'm doing now full time has nothing to do with what I was doing at my W-2 job, but we made a really nice transition between the two because we were doing both of those simultaneously for a number of years. So it was relatively easy. G has a similar story. And, there's so much stuff online about quitting your job, quitting your W-2, leaving college and then hating having to work for somebody else and wanting to be an entrepreneur. And that's fantastic. There's also a lot of people that have put in a lot of time. They're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, and they've worked for a while. They've worked for employers. They're starting to then get that sense of like, is there something else out there for me? How loyal is my employer to me, right? Like these are questions that a lot of people that have been working for a long time start to think. If you're having those thoughts, you probably should start to figure out your plan B and your transition away from what you're doing. Entrepreneurship is very different from having a 9 to 5 job where you report to somebody and you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. But it's very difficult for you to just up and quit your job and then suddenly become an entrepreneur. Like banks are going to have a hard time lending to you. Cash flow is very important, and that might change a lot if you just decide to quit. So our recommendation, something that we've done, something that G has talked about as well, is to have that transition between the two, where your side hustle that you're working on the nights and weekends starts to become more and more relevant, and then you find a way to transition away. So as you listen to this episode, give some thoughts, take some inventory on your own life and how you have income coming in. Is that how you see yourself in 5-10 years? Is it what you want to be doing? Is it where you want to be financially in your life? And then as you start to assess that, you'll start to make some plans and say, you know what, like I think I do need to do something on the weekends. I think I do need to invest a little bit more into real estate. I think there is another opportunity to do that flip, do that short-term rental, do that, that side gig, whatever it is. G and her family have a number of gigs going on. It's not just real estate. She's an author. I believe they have a food truck last I checked. So give it a listen. Follow G on Instagram. You can see all of her great musings and all the things that are happening with all of her family's businesses, and take a listen.
Something I've said in a lot of the podcasts too is just the value of the W-2 job as a catalyst to get you started. There's certainly in real estate, when people are looking to start a career as a real estate agent, there's an eagerness and there's a lot of external advice telling people to jump in and to do this full time. But for some people, that can be a very dangerous and unnecessary step, because I do think the value of a full-time W-2 job is that it can help some people get in the door with their investments. Certainly in real estate, it's a great way to qualify for a loan. It also can give somebody who's disciplined the opportunity to save some money so that they can take a little bit more of a risk when they go into work for themselves. So, certainly if you take it too long, it becomes a golden handcuffs. But I'm just curious, do you see value in the full-time W-2 employment, for somebody who's just starting out, or do you recommend that somebody always kind of jump in and get the time freedom right away?
I think they just need to be aware. Definitely there's a time and place for a day job. And, if you're trying to learn skills, if you're trying to meet people, and if you haven't learned, that financial management and if, and different ways that you can invest so that it could be safer to just have this steady income coming in. And then, once you learn how to actually build a savings from that income so that you're focusing on turning that into passive income, then sure, the day job is important. And in one of the chapters in my book, I answered these questions because they were questions that I was answering myself. All of our investment property that we had leading up to me retiring, it was just so easy to do the refi because I had my W-2 job, and I didn't even need special documents to prove that our income is more than enough to have this loan. And so that was part of the benefits that I wanted to provide people. If you still have a W-2 coming in from day hustle, you're showing a steady income, but these 8 hours is focused on your business, then you're more apt to be able to get a loan because you have that, proof of income.
Yeah. I think what's important here is that this is a transition that people have. It's easier to make it as a transition instead of like rip the Band-Aid off or have there be a complete stop to your job and then start this. I know that some people, they don't have a choice because their job ends, they're laid off, or their company closes, whatever happens. I mean, I've had a number of severance points in my working career where it wasn't my choice, where I left, a company was going under, another company was going under, but position ended. That's fine. You brush yourself off and find the next thing. I mean, I fully believe that work is really just a pathway from one point to another point. And I figured that out the first time it happened, where I was like, oh my God, my company is closing. What am I going to do? We had this weird, dumb foresight when the most recent job that I had, I was in for 6.5 years. My past two employers was 13 years total. Rory, immediately after we got that job, we found our first investment, I don't know, a few months thereafter. And then we kind of fell into what we're doing now, all while I was working that job. And I want to kind of emphasize the word hustle, because you've been talking a lot about hustle, G. And I feel like we've been hustlers. Not that I hustle people out of money. I feel like I hustle. Rory, I feel like you hustle. We were talking about this weekend, we spend a lot of our weekends doing leisure activities. We're certainly involved in our daughters' lives. We've done adult recreational sports for many, many years. But I did that this past weekend. I mean, I am a flag football referee for the league I used to play in for many, many years. I did that all day on Saturday, and then I drove 2 hours up to where Rory was at one of our investment properties and started working on the property. I like doing that. I like doing that. I don't know. I kind of think that's hustle. And sometimes you have to disconnect and just go do something else. But our hobby happened to be what our side hustle was, which is now what my full-time thing is. And how grateful am I that, that situation happened, because not everybody has that. And I liked what I did for work for a long, long time. And then it started to get tiresome and boring and kind of the same thing, but you have those golden handcuffs. So, you need some kind of event to cause you to say, well, what if you don't have this anymore? What if instead you get all those hours back? What can you do to grow your business? And that's the situation that we're in right now. And, if people are listening to this wondering, how do I get out of my job to get into that? I would say, just like what you've done, G, it is a transition. It's not a break point. It is a start now on that thing that is going to really pay dividends many, many years down the line. 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line. If you can get your footing, that you figure out that this is a way to actually be sustainable and make some money, give it a shot, hustle for a couple years, do both those things at the same time. And then if you want to roll the dice and make a go at it, figure out a way to get laid off or figure out a way to leave your job, get some severance if you can, and then move on to your next thing that you've already been doing. That seems like that's kind of the key here. And it is the hustle culture. I mean, I appreciate people who drive Uber and Lyft and do all these side hustles, but they're still kind of working for another enterprise. They're getting money, they need to, but they're not building their own thing, their own business, right? And that's what you're coaching people in, G, right? With your book, you're talking about, a day hustle. You're not talking about just doing hustling stuff that doesn't have a long-term goal. You're talking about things that are sustainable and could become somebody's actual career, right?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. First, it's a transition from that 9 to 5 to being a full-time business owner. And not just in what you're physically doing, but your mindset. It's a learning process too. A lot of people don't realize what kind of responsibility, what kind of mindset you need to be out on your own. And but certainly when you talk about freedom, that freedom, true freedom, is having control of your destiny. So, as an Uber driver, as a, or as a Lyft driver, what have you, like you said, you're still at the mercy of something else or someone else. And that's where growing your own business, that's why people are doing side hustles and transitioning.
All right, there's another quick take with the Real Estate Law Podcast. For the full episode, go to YouTube or Spotify or iTunes or wherever you heard or listened to that quick take. We also have all of our episodes posted at realestatelawpodcast.com. So on behalf of Rory Gill, I'm Jason Muth, one of your hosts, and we thank you for listening.